Terror Tuesday, Extreme, created by Cheyenne Laoyotracool, makes us privy to various stories where characters, apart from dealing with the conflicts in their lives, experience certain supernatural phenomena that bring a complete shift in their perspectives. The first story in the anthology series Terror Tuesday, Extreme, opens with a tragic accident where Elle and their mother find themselves battered and severely injured after their car flips over. And the mother are somewhat conscious, but Elle has dragged herself out of the car and is standing smack in the middle of the road. Calls out to her sister, but as is customary in horror movies, a truck arrives out of nowhere and kills Elle on the spot. The narrative moves forward in time to show us that is under medical observation and is being interviewed regarding the psychological effects of the accident. She says that she is taking her medication, and she feels like she is becoming more and more numb with each passing day. As for her mother, she sometimes acts normally, but then there are moments where she hallucinates that Ella is still around and makes food for 3 people, even though there are just 2 in the house. Things take a turn for the worse when I's mother brings home a doll that supposedly has the spirit of Ella in it. What happens next? Let's find out. The shaman or religious representative who brings home the doll that supposedly has Ella's spirit in it says that, although this practice is great for the soul of the person who is coping with the death of a loved one, there are certain do's and don'ts regarding the handling of the item. He says that, firstly, the doll must be fed thrice a day, as if she is a living, breathing member of the family. Secondly, the doll must be put inside the box that it came in before midnight, and there's no way the doll's caretaker can miss that deadline. And thirdly, the doll can't go beyond the boundary created by a sacred string that has been tied around the house, or else the spell that has been used to bind Elle's spirit to that doll will break. Seeing all this absurdity, tells her friend on the phone that had she driven properly on that fateful night, or allowed her mother to drive, maybe everything that's unfolding wouldn't have happened. I's friend tells her that it was an accident, and she should sleep easy knowing that Elle doesn't blame her for what happened to her. Right after that conversation, the flickering of the lights and the presence of something supernatural draw to the living room, where she finds the Elle doll sitting and looking at a static screen on the TV. When turns off the television, she sees the doll's head suddenly turning towards her and smiling abruptly. Before she can investigate if the doll is sentient or if she is just seeing things, I's mother snatches the remote from I's hand and turns the TV back on because Elle or her spirit evidently likes to watch white noise. Gets increasingly concerned about her mother's behavior and tries to check if the doll really contains Elle's spirit. She breaks the second rule by taking the doll out of the box after midnight and calling out to Elle. She does seemingly appear in the flesh and thanks and her mother for bringing her out of the darkness of the afterlife and putting her soul back in her home. She even forgives for the accident. However, things take a dark turn, as Elle begins accusing of jealousy, and she says that their mother hates because she is her father's favorite and even resembles him to some extent. Where is the father, and why is he so reviled? Well, the father fell in love with another woman and abandoned Elle, and their mother. So, the mother obviously hates him, but she apparently also hates because she sees too much of the father's characteristics in her. Anyway, the following day, confronts her mother for not taking the medications, and she tries to get rid of the doll by throwing it beyond the sacred boundary. This leads to a physical altercation between the 2 ladies, and as a result of it, the clothes on the doll are ripped off. Is shocked to see all kinds of incantations on its body, but the mother shoves to the ground and takes the Elle doll back into the house with her. Realizing that her mother is a lost cause, decides to leave her for good. When she is about to exit the premises, the mother attacks seemingly on the orders of the doll and incapacitates her. When resumes consciousness, she finds herself tied to a chair. She is at the dinner table with her mother and the Elle doll. The meal of the day is I's pet macaw, which the mother has lovingly cooked in a sickening broth. Manages to avoid chewing on the bird's head, but that only aggravates her mother. She starts lamenting about her husband's betrayal and how similar is to her father in terms of their stubbornness. The mother blames her husband for all the miseries that the family has faced, and she blames for Elle's death. She says that she is going to make everything right again by dying and reuniting with Elle along with I. She brings out a bottle of insecticide and chugs down a glass full of the toxic liquid. When she tries to get I to consume it too, the girl manages to get away from her mother. She then tries to stab I, but since the poison starts to affect her system, she fails. But a giant monster appears out of nowhere and tries to choke I to death. The mother stabs the monster, which has seemingly emerged from the doll because of evil spirit-related reasons, and saves I. In her dying moments, the mother realizes her folly and tells I to throw the doll away because it has been the root of all their problems. I triumphantly gets the doll beyond the sacred thread boundary, thereby breaking the binding spell. I realizes that the whole event has been happening in her head. Elle and their mother both died in the car accident. In order to cope with the loss, I was the one who got the dolls, which had the spirit of her family members in them. I hadn't been talking to anyone on the phone. I hadn't been taking her medications. Her debilitating mental condition, grief, and conflicted thoughts about her father, mother, and sister caused her mind to cook up this supernatural episode about her mother going stir-crazy and doing all kinds of weird things with a doll with Elle's spirit in it. The concluding scene, where I cries uncontrollably, is open to interpretation. You can see it as the moment I finally lets go of Elle and her mother, thereby allowing herself to move on in life. Or you could see it as the moment where I loses control of her mind, as she is unable to cope with the fact she is responsible for the death of not just her sister, but her mother as well. The second episode opens with a malnourished girl religiously sewing a dress. She momentarily stops when the sewing pin goes through her finger and then resumes her work again. The scene shifts to Milk and her boyfriend Bank, arriving at a shop for wedding dresses called Nong Nuk Wedding. Milk says that she will be learning how to make wedding dresses from the best so that eventually she can make the dresses she and Bank would wear on their wedding day. Milk's boyfriend doesn't show much excitement regarding the idea of marriage, but it seems like she is used to this behavior of his. Since the guy says that he'll deliver her meal to her, Milk lights up and enters her new workplace. She is greeted by the owner of the place, Nook. Milk gets a tour of the workstation, the mannequins, the photo studio, and her bedroom, and it seems like Nook is very accommodating as a boss. But that's when she drops a bombshell by revealing that she is traveling to Phuket for a few days, and Milk has to look after the shop all by herself. An ominous shot of a religious sticker, the ones that contain evil spirits, falling off a solitary water tanker on the shop's roof indicates that Milk is going to go through hell. Does she survive the ordeal? Let's find out. During her first night alone at her workplace, which doubles as her temporary house, Milk talks to her mother. Unlike India, where the family of the groom is paid dowry money by the bride's family and it's illegal and unethical, in Thailand, the family of the bride gets dowry from the groom. It seems like it's a common practice there, but Milk is strictly against it, and she wants to marry Bank for love and not for the money. Due to the heated nature of this conversation, Milk fails to notice that she is being haunted by the ghost of Nook's previous employee. The effects of said haunting are felt the following day when Milk tends to her first customer. Nothing seems to impress the woman, but since Milk has a reputation to uphold, she brings out a wedding dress that catches her eye. Since it's not a perfect fit for the customer, the topic of alterations comes up. Milk says that she'll need a few weeks to get the job done. The customer says that she needs it to be done in a week. The argument over the deadline agitates Milk, and she blurts out that the customer should choose to lose weight instead of ruining the aesthetics of the dress. This causes the customer to rant on video, and she threatens to release it on social media if Milk doesn't do as she's asked. Since Milk doesn't want to lose her job, she promises to get the dress ready within a week, and even says that she'll give her a discount. The customer bids adieu for the time being, and Milk heaves a sigh of relief. Later that night, when she begins working on the aforementioned dress, she hears a noise from the studio. When she investigates the place, she finds Bank in his boxers, waiting there to startle her. Milk asks how he got into the place and why he is half naked. It's revealed that Milk has some blank spots in her memory because earlier that night, Milk went against her mother's advice of not wearing a wedding dress before her marriage and donned the cursed apparel to seduce Bank. And then she abandoned her demure personality and partook in some aggressive sexual activities with her boyfriend. That's why Bank is in the studio, and that is why he is half naked. However, since Milk has no memory of all this, she is surprised to see him in the shop. Bank isn't particularly observant, so he asks Milk to go for round 2. Milk shifts the conversation to their marriage, and Bank immediately gets angry. He doesn't want to pay the dowry that Milk's mother wants, and he doesn't want to do a big fat wedding because he thinks that is just a waste of money. This upsets Milk, and Bank leaves her in that state instead of arriving at some kind of middle ground because, let's face it, he's not the most loving guy. Episode abruptly cuts from Milk and Bank's argument to Milk waking up at the sewing table, fixing the dress for the customer, while looking at a bottle full of weight loss pills. Milk doesn't have an ounce of fat on her body, and it's unhealthy to lose weight with the help of medication anyway. So seeing her eyeing a bottle of Slim Sure is concerning. She resists the urge to take them and goes back to working on the dress. The following day, we see her looking at her phone, which is full of one-sided texts to Bank. When Milk tries to eat some food, she coughs up what looks like a hairball. Dizzy and weak, she walks into the front of the store only to see a demonic entity wearing the wedding dress she has been working on. She passes out on the floor and wakes up at her workstation. This time, the aforementioned bottle of diet pills is empty, but she has no memory of taking them. She starts working on the dress again and sews in hair from the head into its seams. The following day, the customer and her husband arrive to get the dress and are shocked to see that Milk has aged horribly over the course of a week. The customer empathizes with Milk and the work she has done, but gets angry when she realizes that Milk hasn't increased the size of the dress. Instead, she has reduced it. That's when the dress chokes the life out of the customer, and she rushes out of the trial room to get her fiancé to help her, but he is of no use in that situation. Milk sees the dead woman who keeps haunting her again and faints. When she regains consciousness, the customer, her fiancé, and the dress are nowhere to be seen, and it seems like the jilted woman has uploaded a defamatory video on social media too. Nook calls Milk, since she is worried about the reputation of her shop, but is shocked to learn that Milk knows about her previous, and probably deceased employer, Pete. Noosh advises Milk to get out of the shop and wait for her, but Milk goes into the workstation and finds the dead body of Bank in a closet. Apparently, on the night of their big argument, the spirit of Pete not only forced Milk to have sex with Bank, but she also got her to kill him. By the way, it's unclear if the second altercation with the customer has actually happened, or if Milk has killed the customer and her fiancé and kept the dress, because Milk finds the demented wedding dress at the workstation again, floating in the air. But yes, Bank is dead for sure. Nook enters her shop, only to find the spirit of Pete wearing the wedding dress and standing ominously in the workstation. That's when we get a flashback so that we can learn more about this ghost. So, Pete was an employee at Nong Nooch Wedding, and she used to make these amazing dresses for her customers. She used to be applauded for her work, and she shared an amicable relationship with Nook. But Pete dreamt of becoming slim and conforming to industry-approved beauty norms. Nook told her that the women that she was being envious of hadn't achieved that look naturally. They had gone under the knife. Instead of being disgusted with this practice, Pete chose to undergo some kind of weight loss surgery, and that took a toll on her mental health. Pete became incredibly wary about her weight, to the point where it looked like she was suffering from anorexia and bulimia. Her body image issues bled into her work, and she reprimanded Nook for altering the dresses she made instead of asking her customers to lose weight. This led to a physical altercation between the two, and Nook had no option but to kill Pete. To avoid arrest, Nook stuffed Pete's body in the container on the shop's roof and locked it. So, the ending of the episode made it quite obvious that Pete's ghost has returned to take her revenge. She possessed Milk because she is obsessive about her work, worried about her marriage, and has body image issues. Pete finally gets her revenge by killing Nook. Then she proceeds to arrange a macabre wedding ceremony for Milk. By the time Milk realizes what she has been made to do by Pete, it's too late, and she screams in horror while Pete laughs maniacally. This episode is clearly about eating disorders, which are caused by toxic norms peddled by the fashion industry and social media. story begins with a family moving into a house that's in the middle of nowhere. A news broadcast reveals that the father used to be a police officer and was involved in a casino bribery case, and his son, Chawin, was found using drugs at the house. This got the father suspended from duty and forced his family to move away from the city, at least until things cooled down. A flashback sequence reveals that the father had brought something into the house that he wasn't supposed to, because that was the safest place to keep the item. And Chawin's activities put the spotlight on his father's illegal activity. So, the sense of animosity within the family is palpable and understandable. Anyway, while settling into the family's temporary home, Chawin finds a room that's locked up and has one of those religious seals on it to maybe keep something demonic from getting out. Curiosity gets the better of Chawin and he damages the seal, thereby beginning the first phase of the haunting. What's the ultimate result of Chawin's actions? Let's find out. The first 20 or 30 minutes of Ode to My Family are used to establish the family dynamics and tell us a little about the characters' pasts. The mother used to be a stewardess, and it seems like she had to leave the job because of her husband's actions. The father clearly misses wearing his uniform and hates sitting in this isolated cabin for an indefinite amount of time. Their other kid, Linda, blames Chawin for forcing her to stay in this safe house, and she shares a prickly relationship with her mother and father. She refuses to eat with her family, and one night, when Linda apparently storms out of the dining room, stomps up the stairs to her bedroom, and loudly closes the door, the mother goes after her to reprimand, only to find out that Linda isn't the one creating a ruckus upstairs. The family investigates the room with the torn seal on it. Since there's nothing in there, they close it and retire to their respective bedrooms. During an argument between the mother and the father, it's revealed that Chawin is the result of the mother's extramarital affair with a pilot. So the father scoffs at the notion that Chawin also wants to become a pilot, and the mother supports this dream of Chawin's. As the father and the mother begin to grow apart, with the father eyeing his personal gun and the mother chugging down a bottle of wine, the bond between Chawin and Linda becomes strong. Over a bowl of ramen, Linda tells Chawin that she doesn't hate him because he is her stepbrother. She also doesn't hate him for outing their father. She hates him because he pulled off his stunt before she could go abroad and settle down. This moment is interrupted by the case of Chawin's disappearing noodle, which is swooped off the floor by a ghost. Chawin feels that whoever has stolen his noodle has probably emerged out of that room with the seal on it. So, he decides to put some masking tape on that seal in the hopes that it'll keep the spirits in that room from coming outside. The day after the seal in the mystery room is opened and then resealed shoddily, Chawin finds out that the seal has been reopened. This revelation is followed by a marked change in the mother's behavior. She cooks noodles for the kids, and despite being known as a stickler for cleanliness and hygiene, she picks up a piece of food from the ground and eats it like it's no big deal. But the kids are unable to overlook this, and Chawin looks into the meaning of the seal that was on the room upstairs. He finds out that it's used to trap spirits, and the house was apparently home to another family of 4 who were murdered in that very sealed room. It's also revealed that someone in the family added poison to the sukiyaki that they were eating. Chawin and Linda assume that their mother has been possessed by one of these spirits, and they are all going to meet the same fate as the family that was living there. Their fears are confirmed when the mother says that she is going to cook sukiyaki and then goes off on an unhinged rant at the dinner table. She starts talking about her educational degrees and how she isn't respected by her family. She calls out the father for cheating on her with another woman. She verbally abuses Linda for allegedly hating on her stepbrother because she has to share the family's wealth with him. The mother says that she would have sent Linda abroad like she wanted to, but it's only because of the father's inflated ego that he didn't allow the mother to use her family money to help Linda achieve her dreams. This tirade ends with the mother cutting her hand off and spilling blood onto the stable. The father tries to stop the mother from hurting herself with the meat cleaver, but whatever is possessing the mother ends up taking over the father's mind, and he kills the mother. While Linda stands there, shocked out of her mind, Chawin rushes to his father's room and gets the gun. Linda tries to escape the house, but the father catches her and bashes her head into the door. Chawin threatens to shoot his father, but is obviously unable to do something so violent. Linda regains consciousness and knocks her father out by hitting his head on the staircase. While it seems like the worst is over, the violent entity gets transferred from the father to Linda, and she goes after Chowin. The boy runs to the bedroom and threatens to shoot Linda, who is knocking on the door. With no other option left, Chowin fires the gun and kills Linda. As he walks out of the room to witness the aftermath of the cursed family dinner, he is shocked to find out that his family has been zombified and is coming to get him. So he rushes to that cursed room, trips over a body, and loses consciousness. Chowin envisions a happy version of the sukiyaki dinner, but the blood gushing out of his nose brings him back to reality. That's when it's revealed that the mother, the father, and Linda have actually been killed by Chowin. The kid felt lonely because he thought his mother hated him for being a product of her extramarital affair. His stepfather hated him because he wasn't his son, and Linda hated him because he was a reminder of her mother's affair. So he killed them all, dumped them in the upstairs room, sealed it with that religious sticker, and then died by suicide, thereby trapping the whole family in a depressing loop. In a way, Chowin will always have the company of the family because they'll keep getting possessed by their respective spirits, go on a killing spree, and repeat the cycle for all eternity. It's unclear what it'll take to end the pattern. Maybe Chowin has to overcome his dark thoughts and see the light, thereby freeing his family and allowing them to choose their own paths. The fourth story, where it is revealed that a couple who seemed to be perfect on the outside were in reality not being truthful to each other. So let's find out what happened with Nat and Dao in The Vow, and if they were able to overcome the challenges and reconcile in the end. Nat and Dao studied architecture together, but they hadn't gotten a chance to interact much. One fine day, Dao saw Nat floating face down in the swimming pool, and she immediately jumped into the water as she assumed that he was drowning. But Nat was just being dramatic, and he was surprised that even though Dao didn't know how to swim, she jumped into the water to save his life. Nat told Dao that he was heartbroken, as his girlfriend had left him for his best friend. Nat told her that he'd believed that his girlfriend was the one for him, and he was quite prepared to spend the rest of his life with her. But apparently, she didn't feel the same for Nat, and after the truth was revealed, Nat didn't know what to do or where to do. Nat that day learned that the resort he was in belonged to Dao's father. He didn't expect his colleague to come from such a rich family, probably because Dao was a down-to-earth person, and she never showed off her wealth. Dao told him that she didn't have any friends, and whenever someone did try to befriend her, it wasn't because they felt close to her, but because they felt that having contact with such a wealthy family would be beneficial, especially to find a lit place for a rave party. Nat said that he didn't need multiple friends, but he needed just that one person in his life with whom he could be himself and grow old. That was the beginning of a beautiful relationship between Dao and Nat. After that, they spent the next 8 years together, but things were not as amicable and nice as they seemed on the outside. Both of them had their own secrets, and somewhere that took a toll on their relationship. So we saw that 8 years after that pool incident, Dao and Nat were still together, and they went to visit a temple to pray for a happy life together. That temple was of the deity named the Black Hills Goddess. The legend said that, back in the day, the goddess fell in love with a prince. The prince wanted to marry her, but the royal household was against marrying someone from a lower class. The goddess was a fishmonger's daughter, and with time, she realized that society would never let her marry the love of her life. So she took her own life, and that's why, since then, lovers used to come to the temple to pray for a happy married life. An old woman sitting in the temple told Nat and Dao that though people believed that the story of the Black Hills Goddess was one of love and sacrifice, in reality, it was a tale of revenge. She told Nat and Dao that in other versions of folklore, the prince was considered to be a shrewd man who had an affair with the goddess even when he was already betrothed. Later, he dumped the goddess, and the latter came to know about it eventually. The goddess came to take revenge. She conjured a storm, killed the prince, and used her magic to make all his secrets come to light. The woman told Nat and Dao that a couple shouldn't keep secrets from each other if they prayed to the goddess. Nat and Dao performed a ritual in which they had to shake a box filled with sticks that were marked by different numbers. Now, There was a specific message that corresponded to each and every number on those sticks. Stick number 12 fell from both their boxes, and then they went to read the message that corresponded to that number. Nat read the message, but he abstained from telling Dao about it. The message said that if any partner concealed anything from the other, then they would have to bear grave consequences. Nat wasn't a superstitious man, and he didn't believe that anything like that could happen to them. But he was wrong. We learned in The Vow that Nat was an architect, and he got an offer from a company in Sweden to work for them. Dao, on the other hand, wanted him to stay with her, and she had already planned for them to work together at her father's company and build a resort together. Nat felt trapped in the relationship. He wanted to travel the world, go and work in new cities, and explore his options. Nat didn't even want to get married to Dao immediately, but he just couldn't tell that to her truthfully. Dao also kept her share of secrets. She had requested her father to give Nat a job at his firm, as she knew that he was under a lot of stress because he didn't have a job. She knew that if Nat came to know that he had gotten the job not because of his skill set and talent, but because Dao pitied him, he would never accept it. The spirit of the Black Hills goddess started haunting the couple, and that's when, one by one, they started blurting out the secrets through disjointed shared visions. Nat also told Dao that her father knew that he had gotten offers from companies situated abroad. Dao's father requested Nat to be with his daughter as he was suffering from an illness, and he didn't know if he would survive or not. I believe that the Black Hills goddess symbolically represented the guilty conscience of the two lovers and the secrets that they keep away from one another, and they ultimately resorted to telling the truth to each other as they just couldn't live with it. The film depicted that not being truthful to one's partner is probably the most unfair thing one could do. Nat and Dao loved each other, but over a period of time, they both started feeling suffocated in the relationship. After the goddess intervened, they realized that no matter how big the conflict was, they needed to keep each other aware of everything and then, with time, resolve it together. In multiple scenes, we saw that both Nat and Dao were ripping their skin off from their faces, which probably signified that they got rid of the mask that both of them wore while being in the relationship. They decided to show their real faces and accepted the shortcomings of one another. In the end, Nat and Dao reconciled, and they promised to never keep secrets from each other. In the fifth story, a boy named Nick, who mysteriously stopped coming to school one fine day. Nobody inquired about him until one day, a new teacher named Oil joined the school and became curious about why the boy hadn't been coming to school since the last semester. So, let's find out why Nick wasn't coming to school if he was stuck in some adverse situation, and if Oil could save Nick at the end of spectral class. Oil's goal was to become an administrative officer, but as of then, she needed the school job because she needed experience and good recommendations. Oil generally came to work on the school bus, and at the beginning of the story, we saw that after she fell asleep, the kids made some lewd remarks at her. She got off the bus, and for no apparent reason, a senior teacher exhaled sharply, looking at her as if she detested her presence. Maybe she was new at the job, and she had her way of dealing with things. And maybe the other senior teachers did not approve of her ways and means, and that is why they treated her in such a condescending manner. Oil was taking attendance when she realized that a boy named Pongsakorn, aka Nick, had not been attending the classes for a very long time. Some students told Oil that caretakers often reported that they saw Nick sitting in the class late at night. Now, the school didn't have funds, so it had a rotational policy where, one by one, every teacher had to stay back at the school and spend the night there. Oil didn't believe the rumors that Nick was seen by many teachers late at night on the school premises. She asked her colleagues why he didn't come to school, and nobody knew the real reason. Oil decided to go to Nick's house and ask his parents about the real issue. Nick's father and grandmother lived in a dilapidated house. They came off pretty strange when Oil went over, and she had this feeling that the reality was way more complicated and twisted than what they were telling her. Nick's grandmother, a creepy woman who looked like she was suffering from some mental disorder, told Oil that the boy had assaulted her and ran away from the house. The father, Numb, told Oil that Nick had started consuming drugs and that he hung out with addicts and other such people. The way Num looked at Oil, the erratic behavior of the grandmother, and the entire vibe of the house made her a bit scared, and she left as soon as she could. Nick came to meet Oil at school, and that is when she got to know that the boy was tortured by his father and grandmother. He was being held captive in his own house, and he risked his life and escaped from there to ask for help from his teacher. Nobody asked about Nick after he stopped coming to the school, and Oil was the first one to go and inquire about him. So, Nick felt that he could trust Oil. Nick revealed that her grandmother visited the hermit, and he got her addicted to drugs. After that visit, her grandmother made her son have the same liquid that she prepared using black magic and horrifying ingredients. Nick's grandmother and his father started hallucinating, and they believed that they were being guided by Buddha and that the Lord would give them whatever they prayed for. Religious fanatics exist everywhere, and the entire scene reminded me of those multiple incidents where children were kidnapped by the so-called godmen and forced into child labor and other illegal activities. Num and his mother tried to get Nick addicted to the substance they were having, and the poor kid resisted with all his strength because he didn't want to go insane like them. They were forcing him to serve the hermit at a Buddhist shrine, which they called Tavatimsa, which according to Buddhist mythology is one of the 6 desired realms. It was Oil's turn that day to stay at the school premises at night. She heard some strange sounds coming from the first floor. She gave a call to her colleague, who was probably supposed to be at the school with her. That man bailed on her, and Oil realized that she was all by herself. Oil went to the first floor, and she got the shock of her life when she found a frightened Nick there. Oil got scared as she believed that it was the spirit of the boy that her students told her that teachers often saw, but it was not so. Nick was alive, and he had run away from his house after Oil had gone over that day, asking about him. Nick's grandmother and father came to the school where he was hiding together with Oil. Nick was horrified, but Oil assured him that she wouldn't let anything happen to him. She tried her level best to save the boy, but Num and his mother tortured her and forced her to consume the liquid. Before Oil could regain her consciousness and fight back, Nick bled to death. A hallucinating and trippy Oil then killed Num and his mother in the most barbaric manner. In the end, when the teachers came to school, they were terrified after seeing the dead bodies. Oil managed to survive somehow, but she became so mentally disturbed that I don't think that she would ever be able to start teaching again. The 6th story begins with Bird moving into a new building, apartment number 407. He's got a friend named Key helping him out, and as soon as he shows up at the building, he imagines a woman falling from the sky to her death right in front of him. He even feels her blood on his face, but quickly realizes there isn't a woman or blood. When Bird gets a call from his mother, he doesn't pick up, and this repeats a couple of times throughout the episode. Key wonders why his friend is avoiding his mother. Additionally, Key asks Bird why he had to quit his job to trade online when he could do both things together. It seems Bird borrowed money from his friend and is scraping by because of that. Soon, Bird learns that a beautiful woman lives in the apartment next door. At night, when Key leaves, Bird takes some drugs, possibly to help him sleep, and in his drugged-up state, he hears a woman showering in his room and even speaking to him. But when he gets up off the bed, there's nobody there, and there's a note with some strange rules on it. It tells him not to be alarmed if he hears any strange noises, but he should make it look like nobody lives in his apartment after midnight. Certainly, an odd note to receive from your new neighbor, and he doesn't pay much heed to it. However, when he hears some banging on his door at night, he gets frightened, turns off all the lights, and follows the rules. Bird doesn't pick up his mother's calls because he knows he's done wrong by her. He's been taking drugs and wasting away, not something any parent would like, and likely, he didn't want to hear her nagging or talk to her at that moment so he could feel better about himself. The next day, Bird knocks on flat 406 even though there's a lock on the door. To his surprise, the door opens slightly, and he peeks at a woman in there. When he tells the security guard that someone's trapped in that room, the guy reacts as if Bird's gone insane. When Bird tells Key, he tells him that he'll ask the previous owner of the house if there's something fishy going on there. In the meantime, Bird tries to climb into the house through the balcony, but doesn't find anything unusual there. I've got to admit the two apartments look quite identical, and Bird suddenly wakes up on the toilet seat, making him realize he was dreaming the whole thing. On the other hand, Key meets the owner of Flat 406. He and his wife, who was a nurse, moved into Flat 406 back in the day. When he saw the girl next door, he was immediately attracted to her. The girl, Jane, and the man end up sleeping together, and his wife finds out. They end up leaving the apartment, but before he goes, he slips Jane a note with a warning. This is the same note Bird got when he arrived at the apartment. It was basically so Jane wouldn't get hurt because of the man's wife. However, the guilt was too much for Jane to handle, and she ended up taking her own life by jumping off the balcony. Bird gets trapped in the apartment at night, and the door is locked from the outside. There are a bunch of new rules he has to follow, like not touching the water in the apartment or trying to escape the room. Additionally, if anyone he knows comes to visit, he shouldn't make eye contact with them or follow them out. This part of the episode is a little bit out of sorts because it wants to surprise us with a twist. Bird is actually dead, and his mother is doing his final rituals, which include using water to cleanse and calling out to him. Bird still believes he's in the apartment, but actually, he's already dead. I guess the episode is in a way an anti-drug PSA. If Bird hadn't been doing drugs, he'd have never moved away or stopped talking to his mom. Additionally, Bird wasn't able to differentiate between reality and hallucinations, or ghosts, or whatever you'd like to believe, and so he drifted away from the people who cared for him and got isolated. He started to believe those rules and ended up trapping himself in a terrifying situation. Bird's mother steps into the apartment to say goodbye to her son one last time. He tries to reach out to her, but he's already gone because Jane leads him to the same fate as hers. He jumped off the balcony from room 407. When the flat door opens, his mom looks back to tell her son she's right there for him, but her friend tells her that her son's already in heaven. Unfortunately, we understand this is not true because Bird is stuck there just like Jane, and it's likely that anybody who moves into that apartment might suffer the same fate. The episode begins with a woman and her mother at a riverbank. The old woman, the eponymous grandmother, wants some eels, but her daughter tells her that there are none and they've got enough fish to be free for the ritual for her birthday. I believe it's a Buddhist ritual that the grandmother wants to follow perfectly, but without the eels, it probably feels half-hearted. The younger woman gets a call in the middle of their conversation, and she turns away to take it. When she looks back, her mother's gone, and only her footwear remains. Manta returns home without her mother, making her daughter Nulek super frustrated. So much so that she ends up throwing a bowl at her, a tantrum of sorts, because the kid feels like she's been raised by her grandmother and she doesn't really care for Manta. She even calls her by her first name and berates her for not knowing how to look after her own mother. Nulek spends most of her time texting a friend named Alice online about how she doesn't like her mother and wishes she would die. When she says her grandmother is missing, she gets a reply saying that she might be playing with her, like a game of hide and seek. On the other hand, Nulek also notices that there's a stranger who keeps peeping into their house, a pervert to make matters worse for her. I'm not sure why we see a bunch of missing pet posters in this episode. Maybe we're supposed to believe the entity has been in the area for a long time. I don't know, but I do know that it's always the animals that pay the price of death first in horror, which I absolutely hate. In the meantime, Manta has no choice but to resort to religious prayer to find her mother. She takes a pair of her shoes and visits a shaman. The shaman tells her to tie up her mother's favorite pair of shoes and place them on her mother's bed because it'll help guide her back home. But if Manta's thoughts are distracted, then it is likely that she'll invite something else into her home. So she should make sure it's her mother she's thinking about on the drive home. 3 days later, Nulek's grandmother comes back home. The next day, when Manta's gone off to work, Nulek looks for her grandmother. She's been texting Alice about how she was mad at her mother and deserves someone better. When she goes to her grandmother's room, she finds a bowl under the bed that's moving on its own. When she tries to go near it, something climbs onto her arm and she freaks out and rushes back to her room. However, hiding under her sheets, she turns around to find a ghastly face looking straight at her. When she scrambles off the bed, the sheets rise as if there's someone under it. When Nulek removes the sheets, it's her grandmother, and Nulek feels relieved. I suppose Nulek hates her mother because she feels abandoned by her. She doesn't see how hard her single mother worked to give her the things she has. There's definitely hostility there. But I also think Nulek thinks her mother is very negligent. At home, Nulek is all smiles with her grandmother and asks her to sing her a lullaby. Mantha gets a terrifying call at work. Her mother's body has been found on the riverbank, which means whatever the thing is at home isn't her mom. At home, Nulek gets terrified when her grandmother turns into a monster and vomits up a handful of eels on her. I guess this is some sort of foreshadowing. Nulek tries to run away, and her grandmother tells her that they've got to play hide and seek, but if she finds her, she'll stab her with a knife. Nulek hides in the kitchen, but is found because, obviously, it's not her grandmother, but an evil entity. Nulek tries to make her way out of the house through her bathroom window after her grandma slices her ear off. She gets stuck on the glass at the base of the window, but somehow jumps out just in time with a gaping wound on her stomach. I've got to admit this scene was way too dragged out and didn't work at all. Eventually, Nulek ends up on the street and gets hit by a car. But the person who steps out of the car is actually Mantha, and she picks up a pair of shoes that are tied up off the road and puts them in her back seat to reveal that they have a picture of Nulek on them. In Dear Granny's ending, the episode does a quick rewind, and we learn that Nulek's dead too. So the bowl from the first bit flew across the room on its own. Also, the perverted neighbor? He thinks he's a paranormal investigator making a video about the haunted house that Mantha lives in. He reveals that Mantha lives alone in the house, and that her daughter died after running away and getting hit by a car. But the grandma shows up in the pervert's house along with Nulek, and his neck is slashed. Now, I can't tell if Nulek and her grandmother were haunted by an entity, and then they ended up killing the other guy to join the same cult. But, in all seriousness, I think this episode focuses on family relationships and how your thoughts can manifest into reality in the wrong way. Nulek had all these negative thoughts about her mother, which is why she ended up running away, which led to her death, or, worse, her becoming an evil spirit. But I suppose the same thing can apply to her grandmother, because Mantha was getting tired of looking after the old woman. The ritual they were doing at the beginning of the episode is a freeing ritual, so it's likely the grandmother wanted to simply free herself. Again, I don't know where I'm pulling these stories out of because the show didn't just give us an ambiguous ending, but a completely abandoned story that doesn't explain anything. We'd love to know your thoughts on the ending of Dear Granny and what theories you might have about Nulek. It's a very thin line between ambition and temptation, and it is impossible to figure out when one becomes another. Macbeth was an ambitious soldier, but his temptation made him a murderer. A similar thing happened with Pile. She was a simple woman who wanted to send her 6-year-old daughter Caillou to the best school in the locality, even though she didn't have the means to do so. In the end, it was Pile's ambition that led her into temptation. And I guess it is common knowledge that when you submit to the devil, death and despair follow. The very first frame of Viral Curse established the fact that Pell had desires like any other woman of her age, but she couldn't fulfill them because, being a single mother, she had to look after her daughter and provide her with the best life possible. And in order to do so, Pell had to curb her own dreams and desires. We don't know what exactly happened to her husband, and so we're left to assume that he either died or walked out of the family. In the opening scene, we saw Pell trying a new dress, and I feel this purple dress doesn't belong to her. It was one of the customers in Pell's laundromat who had given it to her. Now, it was evident that Pell had been struggling to pay the shop's rent. She was neck-deep in debt, yet she decided to enroll her daughter in one of the most expensive elementary schools, Triam Fudang Suksa. Her reason was simple. Play wanted to provide the best education for her daughter just like herself. But the question here was it necessary to go beyond one's means and ultimately become a slave of one's ambition? Well, you know the answer. Caillou was merely 6 years old, and even the most expensive education hadn't made a difference at this tender age. Yet parents often fall for that trap, right? The episode had a kind of meta-reference as we saw Peel watching the Terror Tuesday show on her mobile phone. A caller named Bao from Ang Thong narrated an incident to the radio host that had happened with her friend. Bao's friend was a single woman who took her young kid to a temple fair, where at the end of the night, the woman started screaming for help. Her kid was drowning in the water, but no one came for her help. In the end, the woman jumped into the water and found her kid dead. Later, the grieving mother revealed that a ghost took her kid away. She told people that her daughter had been playing with her sister when, in reality, she was a single child. So you see, Bo actually told the story of what was about to happen with Pell. But the purpose was to inject Pell with a sense of paranoia for the rest of the episode. And sometimes, even though something isn't happening in real life, our mind plays tricks on us and makes us believe that it is all real. My theory is that the wet monster doesn't exist. It's appropriately called a viral curse because, like an infection, you get it from others. And anyone who is going to listen to that podcast would pick up the curse, even though they didn't want to. Each one of us has a demon inside, and that monster is just waiting for its turn to come out. The monster we saw wasn't a real one either. Instead, it was Peel's mind playing tricks on her and making her imagine a scenario where a monster killed her child so she could live her life freely without any parental responsibilities. And the ending of the episode confirms that, as when Pell stepped into the neighbor's house, where the monster killed her kid, the monster could be seen wearing the same dress as Peel, which couldn't be a mere coincidence, right? It is without doubt that Peel was a responsible and dedicated mother, but she was a human too. And like all humans, she too had some desires. She couldn't acknowledge freely, because society would judge a single mother for that, won't it? Peel's mind, on the other hand, knew it all. I guess Peel was in a kind of moral dilemma when she was invited to her school friend's party. She didn't want to leave Kao alone at home, but she had no other option either. The best she could have done was to skip the party, and Pell might have done so if she hadn't found a gold necklace in one of the customers' clothes. Here you have to understand how evil works. The devil lures you into its trap by setting up baits for you and tries to lead you into temptation. And if you fall for that setup, then buddy, you are gone. Peely told Caillou that she would return the customer's necklace, but it was obvious she didn't have any intention to do so. Peel stole and sinned, making her the perfect prey for the devil. Also, the gold necklace completely changed Peel's demeanor. She wasn't stressed anymore, and she acted more proud than before. And I know financial security does that to you, but you have to question yourself. Is that money really yours? Things only got worse at Hong's party. Her friends suggested Poulet enroll Caillou into a boarding school so that she could do a full-time job abroad and live the life she always wanted. And if you hadn't noticed, there was a Sweden postcard on Peel's wardrobe at the beginning of the episode. She explains her desire to go abroad more than her friends. It was basically after Peel stole the necklace that she started listening to her desires more and more, and it was from that moment onwards that things became pretty eerie. Each and everything pointed at Peel's desires. For example, in Caillou's drawing, a woman dressed in red was standing beside an orange car, and the washing machine symbolized the loop she was stuck in. So, the question here is, did Peel kill her own daughter to free herself from the shackles? I guess yes. She did. There wasn't any ghost in the neighbor's house, which had been locked forever. It actually symbolized Peel's own desires that she had locked down in some corner of her mind as she wanted to portray herself as a responsible mother. But now that cloak was lifted. The neighbor's house was, in reality, the dark side of Pilo's mind, and she herself opened the window to it. There, we saw a photo frame of Pilo without Caillou by her side. The picture was quite contrary to the original frame which we saw at Pal's house. In the end, Pell tried to save her daughter from herself but couldn't. Pell, the monster, drowned her own daughter in the tub, as she couldn't think of anything else. The customer had given her 2 days' time to return the money she had stolen by pawning her necklace, and at this stressful moment, all Peel could think of was to give a bath to her daughter, who had been nagging her for a long time. Peel's landlord, Auntie Hom, found a leaking roof at her house, which implied that she would be the next victim of the wet monster. Though I am not exactly sure why. I know Auntie Hom was a rude and cruel woman, but that wasn't the reason why the monster attacked Peel in the first place. Maybe the director Elisa Peen wanted to give a smart cliffhanger that only looks dumb on screen if you see it now. Nevertheless, as soon as Auntie Hom switched the TV on, she heard Peel's voice, who told Terror Tuesday's host that the ghost was still following her. Now, I don't think it was the monster, but Pal's own demon because she let her desires take over her mind, and now a part of her conscience feels guilty about it. And it would most likely haunt her forever, because the woman killed her own daughter just to get free from her responsibilities. And yes, she blamed the host for playing such horror stories on the show, which had been infecting people's minds and ruining their lives. And if Auntie Hom is really the next target, then I hope the ghost haunts her well. She is the one who really deserves it.